I found some libraries from ChatGPT. I asked it what libraries made the music for the NFL, and it might have been like,
that's a crazy gem. I've never thought of that. Yo, I am super hyped to present to you an interview that I did with Sagara. And if you're not familiar with Sagara, I feel like if you're a beginner within sync licensing, he is the perfect case study of what it takes to actually find success in this lane. Not only from his music and what he has done as far as trying to achieve his goals, but the characteristic traits that it took to become where he is right now. Some of the key takeaways in this video are gonna be some of the 3 of his biggest tips, some characteristic traits that he thinks it takes to make it in this industry, as well as a lot of other useful insight that he has gained over the years to researching over 150 music libraries, not getting into one, to finding so much success that he has lost count of how many placements he has made. Sagara is someone who's in a lot of different sync communities. He's always putting his nose in front of where the information is. He's someone great that you can learn from. I feel like if you're trying to break through in this industry, this interview is for you. You can find the time code notes below in the description, as well as some resources as far as different interviews that he has done, as well as where you can find them and a product that he sells that might be useful to you along your sync career. Let's get into it. We're with the boy, Sagara. And if you're not familiar with Sagara, he's a composer in the sync licensing space who's pretty much taken the time to really make the mistakes and failures to go from someone who's done a lot of research on the back end of sync licensing to getting a lot of rejections to becoming confident in the sync space enough to be able to not only get placements on Vanderpump Rules, Real Housewives of Miami, Southern Hospitality. I think you got one on Below Deck as well. And if there's any other one, Cigars, please add to this. But he's also someone who's also willing to share his process along the way, being in a lot of different sync communities. And I feel like it's dope that he recently did an interview with Producer Whisper from Smash Coast Music. And if you're not familiar with them, I definitely recommend you checking the description below and checking out their interview. Ironically enough, we asked Sagara to do an interview around the same time, which is pretty cool. So I feel like you're getting 2 different aspects of his story. So without further ado, I want to welcome you, Sagara. Sagara, please, man, give us a little quick introduction about yourself. And please let me know if I missed any placements that you recently got that's on that list.
hey, appreciate that, man. Hello, everybody. Man, I've got so many placements now that I've lost track, to be honest. I have to check my tune set.
Nice.
To find out the specific shows. But hey, everybody, I'm Sagara, or Martin Sagara Richards. I'm a composer and sound designer for Sync. I'm from Palm Bay, Florida. And how you want to get into this? Like the full background, like from the start, or?
You did a good job of kind of describing your background. I feel like on Producer Whisper's channel, and some of the things that I really took away is the fact that your background, you know, your mother was into producing as well as being an artist, and you got that insight of seeing her kind of doing that at a young age and being inspired by that, and then her really encouraging you on your music journey, which I think is pretty dope. And you also did it was really cool hearing that you were in the AI space, like kind of in the background of working with one of the biggest search engine companies. So I would love to hear any other part of your journey that you feel like you didn't share in that interview that really was like pinnacle to where you got into learning about sync licensing and really knowing that this is where you want to get into.
Okay, so a couple things that I meant to include in that interview is that my brother is also a huge part of my inspiration. He's a rapper, producer. He was video editor, you know, After Effects, all that, and really big in the local scene.
Right.
He had his own studio, and I went to his studio a couple times, you know, to learn some things. And that was also a really huge part of me pursuing music as a career. I collabed with him on my previous album, actually, with him on vocals and for Sync, and I thought that was like, you know, pretty dope. Same with my cousin, producer. Even his kids are producers now, that's so crazy to me. But I remember one night we were all at our aunt's house, and he recorded a song with all of us in the living room, and we had us like role playing. I was like role playing like this little kid, and my other cousins were like role playing like this couple fighting, but they were rapping it and singing it, and I thought that was so cool. But so that like, I guess that seed plant has always been there just straight from the start. Like the more I think about it, the more I like start realizing things. But jumping into sync, as I, mentioned, my mom came up to me one day and she was like, you're really good at this. Why don't you try making a career out of it somehow? Mm. And I was like, dope. I'll try that. Most parents aren't going to do that. They're going to, the moment they hear music, they're like, what the hell are you talking about? Go get a normal job.
100%.
And that did happen with, my old man. He was very hard on me in that aspect, but I think it helped me grow even more. He was like, you're going to, forget all this. You're going to get a job. You're going to go to school. And, it's either my way or the highway type of deal. Mm-hmm. And, I went to school for a bit. That's where I learned about computers. I do have a background in PC repair.
Oh, dope.
And, I did learn that. And then afterwards I pursued, music a little more. So I hopped into sync. Well, hopped into starting to compose, like that pre-sync era where I was composing for Fiverr, learning how to work with clients, learning my soft skills pretty much. That really taught me my soft skills as far as, networking, all that. And a few years after that, I just, I had a client who said, I made a song for a talk show for them. And that started having me ask questions. It started, I started asking myself questions like, how do I get my music on these talk shows? I was thinking like Ellen and Tyra Banks and all this other stuff. But yeah. I'm like, how do I do this? And then I had another client who, as you remember, they said my music sounds like video game music. Mm-hmm. And, that upset me at first because I was like, man, that's not my genre at all. What are you talking about, lady? Mm-hmm. But she said that. And then I started asking these questions, how do I get my music into video games? Because, what's this, 2019, 2018? I had no idea. I don't think there were many tutorials on that specifically back then. Right. There is now. There's like, a whole breadth of information. But and then I started pursuing sync. I got on the phone with a music supervisor somehow, and that didn't go great.
And if you could describe what a music supervisor is, in case anybody's watching who doesn't know what a music super is, how would you describe them in the sync licensing space?
I would describe a music supervisor as someone who is supervising. The music is pretty self-explanatory, but determining what music is going to get pitched to clients, right? And kind of like that almost like a middleman, almost where they're taking the music, sifting through it for quality because they might not use certain songs, and pitching that to the clients.
Right, 100%. Yeah, I kind of like to describe them as like the A&R almost of like a TV show where they're like picking the right mood and the right feeling for the show or the movie. And I feel like they're like at the top of the food chain. So how was your experience? You shared this in Producers Whispers interview as well, but how was that experience? Like that being basically like your introduction into trying to get into sync licensing?
For introductions, it was a bad one. I'm going to be honest with you because I was making beats for artists at that time.
Right.
And I didn't even know what a sting was. She was asking me questions about like, does your beats have stings? Mm-hmm. Do they have button endings? All these different terms for that. And I was completely lost. I'm like, what are you talking about, lady? what's a sting? And I think when I asked that, she was like, oh my God, this guy doesn't know what he's doing.
Right.
But none of my beats, I don't even call them cues, but none of my beats were structured, for sync at all. Mm-hmm. And she was like, oh, you're just a beat maker. And that stung.
Mm. She said that?
Yeah, she said that in kind of like a condescending way.
Right.
But I understand I did, I wasted this woman's time, essentially. But that was my introduction to sync, not a good one. A couple of days later, I had my first emails, my first replies back from a library. And they gave me a shot, said, make us 10 cues. We'll give you some references. Here you go. And, I kind of stumbled through that one. It took me a bit.
Right.
And it took me so long to make that the person in charge of my submissions, he was gone by the time I was done. And that, I later learned that happens in the industry, but for me, that was like, that really, really hurt. That stung because I tried to resubmit to reach out to them to let them know the situation. Mm-hmm. And I saw that they were opening my emails, but not responding. Mm-hmm. And that one really hurt. But, why?
Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry about that. How long ago was this? Like, how long ago were you actually kind of introduced and submitting to that music supervisor, or on the phone with the music supervisor, and then submitting to music libraries?
That was like mid to late 2019.
Okay, so right before when COVID hit.
And right before COVID.
And I feel like those are two, and this kind of goes on to kind of my next point, because your characteristic trait, and I talked to you about this before we got on the Zoom call, that your characteristic traits are exactly what it takes to really make it in this industry. How did you deal with those type of rejections almost? And then like basically hearing all these things and not have the initial thought like, you know what, maybe this is not for me. More so of like shifting your mindset of saying, okay, how can I figure this out?
Right. So that situation with that library, that put me on the ground for a bit. I'm not going to lie to you.
Right.
I didn't make, like after that happened, I didn't make music for like basically a year. I wasn't playing my guitar anymore. I wasn't making beats. I was like, oh man, I'm really down in the dumps. Maybe this isn't for me.
Right.
But so I worked a job with the tech company, helping them train their AI. And I did that for a whole year up until their client decided they no longer needed us. And then that's when they fired everybody. 150 people lost their jobs at once. And
crazy.
Yeah, it was tough. But for me, I won't say that I completely quit music. I didn't completely quit. I was learning music theory during that time that I wasn't making beats or learning instruments or playing instruments. I was still learning theory because I didn't know at the time. I was doing everything by ear. But I learned theory during that time and then, got fired. And then at that point, something in my head just clicked. It was like, you know what? I failed hard. I haven't been making music. I need to like really pursue this sync thing because deep down, I felt like this was what I was meant to do. Mm-hmm. And I told myself, I'm like, you know what? No matter how many times I fall, I'm going to get right back up. And and I fell a lot. I fell so many times, consistent rejections, consistent ghosting, consistent, failures, essentially.
Right.
And this went on for like months of just back and forth failures. And then around November, I don't even know how I found your server, to be honest with you. I genuinely don't remember, but I'm glad that it happened. But I found your server and you saw my story. I was basically airing out my grievances. I was extremely frustrated.
Right.
But I asked for help, which is something that I, rarely ever did. I'm a very introverted person. Mm-hmm. And I was like, if I wanted to learn something, I would just, hop on Google or something to figure it out myself. And I think that's one of my huge mistakes is thinking I could do it all myself. I think in this sync space, nobody can do it all alone.
No,
you can't.
I agree.
You need a team. You need people to be successful. I mean, maybe some people can do it alone, but it's going to be a very difficult path. But that really taught me to start asking for help and start communicating more instead of being so introverted. So I went to your server, aired out my grievances, and then you took pity on me.
No, not at all.
No. But you saw my story, and you became very interested in what I had to say, and you offered to basically help me along and help get to the bottom of what these issues were. So I watched the video that you made, and I really appreciate that. That video was exactly what I needed to hear, because up until that point, when you show your music to like family and friends, they're always going to say it's dope. They don't want to hurt your feelings, or maybe they're not trained to listen for the right things when it comes to sync. So of course, they wouldn't know. But having someone come in who's within the sync space, has been through the ringer, been through the fire, and knows what works. That was very beneficial to my career overall. And I'm super thankful for that. The video is still up in case the audience wants to watch.
But yeah, to give a little bit more context, like Sagara came into the Discord that we have, our server, our sync community. And basically the way he presented it is that he had researched, and correct me if I'm wrong, over 150 libraries, and you were looking for some insight. And then at that point where I already knew that I wanted to help someone like from start to finish on their pitch. Cause that's before I was doing mentorship. I had like a course of like how to actually get into this, but I never had that, that one-on-one like mentorship yet, but I knew that I wanted to do that with someone. But the fact that you came in and then you kind of explained like the approach you took, you explained how many different libraries you researched. It just stood out to me because like people think that the first 5 libraries you submit to, they're going to accept you and you're going to get your first sync placement. And that's not the case. There's a journey you have to go through this, and there's a lot of different angles you have to really learn about this this lane to get to that point. And your initial rejections are painful, as you explained earlier. Like when I first got when my first track got critiqued, kind of how we were doing it on that video that we made. Basically, I took Sagara's like whole approach. Sagara had a website which is very unique. Not a lot of people who are submitting for sync have their own website. He took the time to make his own website, have his tracks all listed. He had a whole album already ready, and we basically took his approach and the music that he had and kind of tailored it to fit for sync. And I think that says something to you because you had that special characterization. But for me, when I was working for a music library for about 7 years, and we had the head composer, Russell Howard, and he's won crazy amount of awards for like being like the songwriter of the year for TV and film. And he one time critiqued my track and he didn't know it was my track. And it's hard to take that feedback and not take it personal, but also look at it in a way of like, okay, this is a way I can improve. And that's exactly the type of mindset you approached within the Discord server. That's the type of mindset that you had, even getting past that initial point where the library kind of ghosted you when they switched to a new team member. So like, I feel like what's stuck out to me is like, one, you were determined. It's obvious that you're determined because you researched and you tried so many different ways. And 2, you had the humility to look for help. Like that I would not be where I am, and Clint and everybody else in this space would not be where they are without someone showing them the ropes. And I feel like It's a chain thing. That's the beautiful thing about the sync community. For the most part, people who have the pure intentions in this lane are willing to help, are willing to take the time to teach you and give you that insight and that feedback. So I commend you for that, because I can see you already doing that right now. You're already taking that info that you learned from that time and sharing it along the lane. But I wanted to give kind of more of that backstory of like where you were at. And I think that kind of leads me to my next point, is that you take the time to learn, and it's not like you're just in one community. And I think that if you're in this sync licensing space, we see people like, I think Revisions, Creator Roll Music, AO Snoop, aka Charismatic. They're all in different sync licensing communities. And I kind of wanted to see, I think that's important. I feel like it's super important to be in different sync licensing communities to learn different angles. There's a lot of different lanes in this industry, and you're getting a lot of different insight. And after hearing it, for a certain amount of time, it's all going to start clicking together. So what are some communities that you're in that you find really beneficial that you would suggest to someone getting started out into sync licensing?
So first and foremost is yours, of course. The Realm.
I appreciate that.
That's super, super beneficial. Let's see. I'm in the Heat Discord server, which, that's been cranking up with sync lately. And I'm in the Make Music Income Discord server. I don't post very much, but I do lurk just to see what people are saying. The Producer Whisperer, huge gems being dropped by someone who's a CEO of a sync agency.
100%.
Anthony Clint, hugely helpful. Yeah, he does the weekly track reviews as well. And I was in there, when I was first getting started, and that has been super helpful. Who else? As far as the video game space goes, well, not just games, but overall sync is a DIY music biz. Greg Savage.
Yeah, Greg's a cool dude.
Cool dude, super helpful. I think that's about. Well, I also patrol the music library report forums.
Oh, okay.
I'm in there sometimes. I don't have a membership, but I do. I figured out how to view it, but
Yeah.
stuff like that. And just Instagram. There's plenty of people talking about sync who may or may not have helpful advice. Some of it may be surface level, while some is like actionable. So overall, that's pretty much where I am as far as where I find out about sync. Oh, and can't forget the GOAT, Jesse Josephson of Sync by Music.
Yeah, Sync by Music.
Can't forget him because he's been having these interviews as well with these companies, asking them those hard questions that they kind of danced around. But
are you talking about? I seen that one. You talking about the Pine 5 one?
Yeah,
that was a good interview, man, and he did a good job of trying to extract information on that one. I feel like he has his nose right where it needs to be as far as the future of sync licensing right now.
Yeah, he really pressed them, and that's about it. Yeah, that's about it. That's the whole list.
100%. So, given a bird's eye view of where you're at now with your sync journey, and then looking back to like 2019 when you first started, what were some of the biggest changes you made to kind of find success in sync?
I listened to what y'all told me because my beats were not up to par. I mean, not beats, but cues. My cues were not up to par, to be completely honest. A lot of them were very, very quiet. They weren't, smacking people in the face like they should. Most of them had the quick intros. I was kind of struggling with my B sections, I've noticed. And just overall sound selection as well. Sound selection was a huge one that I was kind of lacking in. And I think that was about it. I think the length was good, but sound selection was a really, really huge one. A lot of my cues sounded very dated. And the mixing, I had to, brush up on my mixing. Some of my 808s weren't cutting through. Some of my kicks weren't cutting through. Just stuff like that, mastering, mixing, just the whole 9 yards. I had to really hone in on, over the months. This wasn't like an instant thing, but like, over the span of a few months, just learning those things and getting better at that.
I feel like a lot of people who are trying to start with sync, one of their biggest issues most of the time is sound selection. Like, how do you approach sound selection now compared to them? Because I feel like it's hard for me to kind of like teach sound selection now, because after a while you start to get used to it and you start to just hear things that sound unique or different or more modern. And this is not sound design. This is separate than sound design. This is sound selection. How are some approaches that you take now compared to then as far as sound selection?
Listening to modern music first and foremost. The stuff that's on the Billboard charts, I'll occasionally pop in, on a playlist and just listen to what's going on sound selection wise. I think that's one of the best references. And production music as well. I'm going through like some already made cues on different libraries and just listening to what they're doing pretty much. And then I'll hop on either Reddit/drum kits. That's one of the most useful places.
Yeah, for sure.
And I do have a Splice subscription as well. That's been super duper helpful because that helps me get the drums, the FX and the synth presets for like Serum and stuff like that. And I'll occasionally get like new like preset packs, stuff like that, just to stay on top of the sound design game, because it will make or break, a cue, in my opinion, if it sounds too dated. Now we're at a point where, older stuff is starting to get requested, but if you're saying something's contemporary, then it needs to sound exactly like it, exactly like that.
100%.
So that's how I approach, sound selection now compared to back then.
Dope. Yeah, I feel like that's definitely one of the biggest things that I see that people struggle with. And it's not even like a major thing. Like, I feel like sound selection, people who struggle with sound selection, because I was one, I feel like still to this day, something I'm still trying to learn. People who struggle with sound selection have the meat and potatoes of the track. It's just picking the right sounds to make it hit or have a more dynamic effect or more emotional effect that resonates in our current environment. A perfect example is like, you can't put like a 2007 Kanye West snare clap, like the snare clap that he had back then that was using like all these neo beats and stuff, and then try to put it in a trap beat now. It doesn't sound right.
It doesn't work.
Yeah, so I feel like that like it's not an easy fix, but it is. It's like it's an actionable fix really, because it's not something that's like theory or like learning melodic lines that are catchy and stuff like that. It's more so just picking the right sounds, and that's something that I heard actually when we were editing your track. It was like you already had the elements there. It was just about just picking the right ones that fit in the context. So I appreciate you
Right.
sharing that. Appreciate you sharing that insight. So I kind of want to go back to the point I'll make earlier, is that you have the character trait of what it takes to succeed in sync. Is there any advice that you can give to anybody who is dealing with that constant rejection, or maybe even dealing with doubt as far as the sync licensing space because of the rejection they're getting?
Sure. I say for every win that I have, there's like 15 failures that, precede that. And, some people can't handle that, I suppose, but it's just so common within the sync space. You're going to have a lot of losses before you hit that win.
Yeah.
And it's normal. It's a part of the sync space. It's a part of success in general, not just with sync, but with life. You're going to hit those stumbling blocks, and you have to be able to pull yourself up and, get to the other side, walk through those Legos, walk through the fire.
Yeah.
And come out stronger, because if you really want this, then you're going to have to be able to, accept, those facts of life.
100%.
It's just how it's got to be if you're going to succeed.
Definitely. I feel like sync licensing is one of those lanes that definitely builds you in a lot of different ways, as far as like having the right character traits, like dealing with the rejection and having to know that you have to improve in certain ways. But I feel like what can't be really taught that you've done, that I didn't even know you were doing, that I heard in the producer whisper interview, is that you would go to live critiques and you wouldn't just send your track and kind of just flex a track. You would go in there with intention, and you would sit there and you would write notes that you were hearing from each critique you were getting from your tracks, no matter what community it was in. And I feel like that's something that you can't really teach someone to do that on their own. Like I feel like you have to want it. You have to want this to really learn something like that. Like you can't just dip your toe in and just think, oh, I heard a nice video about, this can pay you for a long time. It's more so of like, you really have to have the pure intention of wanting to get into this lane and the determination to really like take the time to improve in this craft. So I commend you for that, because not a lot of people will do that. Not a lot of people will take that time. What kind of set that off for you as far as like taking the time to write those notes and having those pure intentions when you're submitting your music for live critiques and stuff like that?
By that point, I was hell bent on improving pretty much. And I was like, I'm going to do whatever I can to improve. If that means like taking notes or recording the streams, but I didn't have to do that because VODs exist now. But just anything I could do to improve from people who are already in the industry. And so I would go there, I would take my notes, and these were like very detailed, things I would be writing. Like, I need to turn this kick up by like this many dB, or I need to switch out this kick for this one, or I need to switch out this pluck for this one because it sounds dated, stuff like that. Or, just anything I could possibly do to improve overall. And I think anybody who's like in this space and submitting cues for a critique should be doing that, because I know we can't like memorize everything. Right. And most importantly, not getting offended if like the cue wasn't it, 100%. being able to accept that criticism, and being able to accept when something might not be up to par, and improving based on the advice that you're given. I think that's super important for improving overall.
100%, man. I could not agree more. And like I said, I commend you for taking that time and having that insight, because not a lot of people will take that and do that and take the time to actually not just like hear the feedback and apply it, but just like write down the technicals of everything that it takes to do that. So that kind of leads me into my next questions. Like, if you could help anyone trying to get into sync, what are your 3 biggest tips that you can share getting accepted into a music library and then landing their first sync placement?
Um, Number one is becoming a direction follower. I know that might sound like a little cliche, but you need to be able to follow directions overall. Like if a library says you need to have your files in this format, you know, as an example, a library that I work with, they want exactly 400 milliseconds of silence at the beginning. And everything needs to be peaking at negative 0.05 dB. And so if I don't do that, those cues are getting rejected.
Right.
And so you have to be able to, follow those directions, listen to what the staff are telling you, read your submission guidelines, stuff like that. Just keeping an open mind. For number two, getting into this space, being honest with yourself first and foremost, I think is super important. Being able to accept criticism, being able to learn, having that drive to do your own research. Don't just wait for people to give information to you. I think is super important.
That's a good point. I like that one.
Becoming an expert at research, people call it like YouTube University or stuff like that. Becoming a search engine expert, especially learning how to use Google, because, I get questions sometimes from folks in the community, and some of these things can be found on Google. Just a quick Google search. Not to be like mean, but like it's becoming an expert at these search engines and these tools that are available to you.
Right.
Because it's really going to help you push yourself forward. So like the Google search operators, putting things in quotations or doing like stuff like site and then colon and then, the website that you want to go to. And even utilizing, tools like ChatGPT to find stuff out. I found some libraries from ChatGPT. I asked it, what libraries made the music for the NFL, and it might have been like it might have been like a little bit dated, like a tiny bit, but it listed some libraries that I've seen, and sure enough, I did some digging, and they did the music for NFL, stuff like that.
That's a crazy gem. I've never thought of that. I tried ChatGPT I use ChatGPT all the time, but I tried it for researching libraries, but they would give you like the generic 46 top music libraries that you can find on Google. But I never thought to actually research the type of placement you want to get and then researching the library. That is a huge gem. I like that one.
Yeah, it kept a list. I think it listed like 10, if that. But it told me, and I'm like, holy crap, I need to be using this more. And ever since that day, I've been using ChatGPT like every day for like different things. But just stuff like that, essentially becoming a tech expert. And number three, which is super, super important. If you don't do this, your queue it's not even going to get seen. And that's learning how to do metadata. Some libraries handled it for you. Like I know with a SIG, they do our metadata for us, but the other ones that I work with, I'm doing my own metadata, and you have to learn how to do that. At some point, it's going to happen. So learning your keywords, how to describe your track, learning what key it's in, because some of them do ask for that. Learning the overall mood, coming up with like a short, like one sentence descriptor of your track. Learning how to embed this information. There's different ways to do it. There's Disco, there's MP3 tag, there's iTunes, different things, stuff like that. You basically have to become a tech expert is basically what I'm getting at.
Right.
Just all that kind of stuff.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Metadata is super important. That was like when I first started as an intern for SIG was 7 months of just entering in keywords and doing the metadata for the whole entire catalog drop of that quarter. So I did it for a couple of quarters, and I would just sit there, listen to the track, write the description of like where I can hear this being used. And that way, like if an editor or a music supervisor is searching a track for tracks in a database and you're putting the right keywords, it's going to pop up and it's going to increase your chances of your track not only getting heard, but being used as well. So yeah, I think that's a really good gem, is being able to use metadata. I didn't realize that a lot of these libraries are making you put them in yourself. I do put it in myself for one library, but a couple of others, I just let them do that. But I feel like it does benefit you a little bit more to kind of put it in yourself. So that's good insight, actually. That I didn't even realize that. And is that a non-exclusive library that makes you do that, or are they exclusive?
Let's see. Yeah, the main one that has me doing like most of my metadata, that's an exclusive library.
Interesting. Okay.
And then the other three are, non-exclusive.
For sure. So,
but yeah,
given your background in tech, you always have your nose in all the right areas. Every time we're in Discord, you drop some type of resource or tool that a music supervisor or a music licensing company may be using, which has come to a point where like I'm learning from you and I'm kind of picking your brain on like what you're seeing as far as what's being used in this industry. How are you finding these tools? And then what are some of your favorite ones that you've come across so far? Like you introduced us. I already knew about source audio, but you told people about source audio. I didn't know about source audio detection, which is crazy. It's like TuneSat basically, which basically detects all your placements. What are your favorite ones and how are you finding these?
So my favorite one right now is a cyanite.ai. I don't remember exactly how I found that, but I think I was just searching on like, might have been Google or Instagram or something. But I was trying to get to the bottom of how Viacom determined that the cues that we made sounded like other songs. Because I'm like, how the heck did they even come to that conclusion? I've never heard the song a day in my life.
Yeah,
but
yeah, for sure.
Figuring that out, and I stumbled upon Cyanite, and lower on their page they listed their clients, and I saw a lot of big name clients on there. And I'm like, this might be what they're using essentially. If not them, then at least some client that we're going to end up with eventually. So I started using that, and that's been super helpful. I think MDO does that as well. Hyper Audio, I'm not entirely sure. I know they have some sort of element.
Midio?
Yeah, Midio.
Yeah, I think you're right. Pretty sure. And if you guys are not familiar with Midio, they're a music library that you actually could submit to right now. That's not like an accepted base library. It's more so of like you sign up with them and then they have briefs that you can automatically submit to. But yeah, I think Midio, you're right, has that option as well.
Yeah, they have that as well. And those have been super helpful just for not only like finding like similarities, but learning about new songs to learn from essentially. Because most of these are like modern songs. And it's just good to know that, because then you can use that in your metadata. You could say sounds like, such and such, because some music supervisors are looking for that. Sometimes, replacements for tracks or stuff like that has been super useful. But the way that I find like a lot of things is through Instagram. Instagram, I don't necessarily enjoy Instagram, but it's one of the greatest tools that you can have at your disposal. Yeah. As far as finding stuff, because you can find new libraries this way, you can find new sync agents this way, because they're posting their wins, as they should. They post their wins and they'll tag people and tag all these companies, and then I'll search through that and do some digging, essentially becoming like a master of just like social media pretty much. If you see my past posts, you would see that I would tag it in a very specific way. I would use very specific hashtags, like music licensing, music library, stuff like that. And the reason I started doing that is because I saw a music library making these posts and using those exact same tags. And these posts might not get a lot of interactions, but they're always looking. They're always looking through our social media, through our websites, all that stuff. And I started doing that to sort of like not only post, but sort of like get their attention a little bit without, prying into them too much.
Right.
And when I started doing that for like a few weeks, I started getting like likes from them. And I'm like, oh, okay. I forgot exactly who I learned this from. I want to say it was like Gummy Beats. That I learned that from. This is like way back in the day.
Right.
But I never really I never started doing that until I started doing sync. And it worked. And more recently, I used that fact to reach out to that one of those libraries that liked my post. I'm like, hey, I saw that you liked my post. this such and such post. The standard pitching email. I really like what you guys do. I listened to such and such album. I think my music might have a fit, stuff like that. And it got a response from them. They complimented my work. They said, you're dope. We love what you do. And, it's just, I guess it's showing them that you're paying attention, essentially.
Right.
And I think that's been super helpful. And then, yeah, just going through Instagram. That's how I found the Source Audio stuff, or rather, I got into the Source Audio stuff because I started noticing that a lot of these libraries, that's like their main, software, Source Audio, Source Audio here, Source Audio there. That's all. I mean, that's not all they use, but that's one of like the main ones. And so I went to Source Audio's social media and started sifting through their posts, because every time they get like a new library that uses their software, they post about it.
Yep.
And that's a good way to find new libraries.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. Source Audio is like a platform kind of like Airbit or like SoundClick or Soundy, where you can like, basically the library puts their entire catalog and they have like this pre-made website. And a lot of companies go to that, to Source Audio to kind of like build out their own platform to have their entire catalog on there. So, and that's a big gem. They do post their libraries that they add to their clients. They're basically their clients. They'll add it to their site. Sometimes they'll send out a newsletter about it. They'll send out an email. They sent out an email this morning about their basically their track detection that I read through today. That's very useful. But it sounds like what you do for a lot of these companies, or to find these resources and stuff, is that you reverse engineer success, which is very important. That's something I do still to this day. Like, I feel like you have to constantly be a student of sync licensing, because the landscape always is changing. So that's a good gem, is like, see where these people are, see what kind of tools they're using, and kind of reverse engineer like how they're using or why they're using them, or people they're connected to, or people in their network, like who owns that company, and then who's following that company. Then you're going to find a lot of different things as far as new music libraries to submit to, what kind of tools they're using. That way you can better serve them. That's something that I'm really into, is basically seeing what companies, my target now is going after music supervisors, what kind of tools they're using, what makes their life easier. Like, how can I provide them that extra step that makes their life easier to provide value to them in order to provide them music, and for me to build that relationship. So that's a great way to kind of get into this lane, is like reverse engineering success, and then taking those tools that you're learning from and those resources and using them into action. Speaking of tech and resources, given your background with AI and working for that search engine company, are there any tools from AI that you think that benefit sync licensing, and kind of give your insight as far as like how you feel like AI is going to affect sync?
I think it's going to affect sync in a good and a bad way. I think there's going to be some ups and downs. Well, I mean, there already are, but we've been hearing about AI being able to compose full tension cues with no help, stuff like that, and possibly more cues as time goes on. Even full vocals. I've heard some like AI vocals that sound exactly like a human person, and I'm like, we might be in trouble a little bit. But it's not all doom and gloom.
I agree.
Just like any other tool, you can use AI to your benefit. You can use, in terms of like composition and making cues, you can use stuff like Scalar 2 for like coming up with chord progressions, stuff like that. You could use like Isotope Ozone, Nectar. Yeah, Isotope Nectar and Isotope Ozone, they both have elements of AI where it'll take your track and master it for you. Like the AI mastering sites, it'll do that for you. And that really helps speed up how fast I can get, cues out to clients. I know how to mix and master, but it takes a bit.
Right.
But having those tools available to me allows me to serve my clients more efficiently. And some people might scoff at that, but if you're doing sync, you need to come out with you need to be fighting with all your limbs, pretty much.
Right.
Any tool that you can have at your disposal, it's fair game to use that, as long as you're not like doing anything crazy with it. But just utilizing the tools that you have at your disposal. Utilizing Chat GPT as like a personal assistant has been really useful, and even as like a little AI lawyer, pretty much. You can use Chat GPT to break down these contracts into like simpler terms because they use a lot of legal jargon that you know someone who isn't a lawyer might not know or might not understand. And having ChatGPT there to break that down has been super, super helpful. I tell that to anybody who messages me about like a contract. I'm like, use ChatGPT because it's one of your greatest assets. It's gotten to the point where you might not even have to hire a lawyer sometimes, which is crazy to me. Now, of course, a lawyer is good to have, entertainment lawyer, but as far as like reading the contracts, that's been super useful. Things like proofreading your emails. I mess up my emails sometimes, but having it proofread and maybe having it trim off some of the fat. So I tend to type a little bit too much, and so I'll take my text and I'll tell ChatGPT to break this down into like maybe like a few sentences.
Yeah, I do that too.
To have it straight, and then just proofread it. Clean up any errors and stuff like that has been super helpful in terms of like the AI space. And you can use like generative stuff as well, like coming up with melodies. Because I know we all have those days where there's just no magic happening, like complete writer's block, and having like something that can generate melodies can sort of like get you like it can get you started at least. Maybe it's not going to do the whole track for you, but it can at least help you get that idea there to start sketching out a full cue. And I think that's helpful, stuff like that.
For sure.
So utilize AI to your benefit. It's not something to scoff at, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like if you think about any era of the music realm, like think about how VSTs affected hardware synths or hardware plugins. Think about how the DAW affected the recording studio. There's still a DAW. I mean, there's still recording studios. There's still hardware synths. It just shifted kind of the landscape of the accessibility and creating at a faster pace and creating more efficiently, as you mentioned earlier. And I feel like that's always going to happen. I got reached out by a company called Muse, and they have a new plugin called Spark. It's AI basically. And what you do is you prompt what kind of like chord progression you want, like create a chord progression for an R&B track that Alicia Keys would sing to, and it'll come up with a few chords, and you can just play it on your keyboard. And I'm like, I was trying it out, and I'm like, dang, this is actually pretty efficient because like you still have to come up with the entire track. You only have the chords there. Right. And that chord could be for a piano, guitar. You don't even know. Like it could be for any type of instrument. So definitely helped speed up that process as far as creating. And I think that it's definitely going to be something that's utilized. And kind of how, to add to this, kind of how I see AI affecting the landscape of sync licensing is that it's going to cause us to move upstream. Like at this point, in my opinion, there's no point of getting introduced into micro licensing. And micro licensing is basically creating music that's for like, very, very commercial sounding stuff. As far as like, if your local realtor made an ad and had like some very corporate type of music in the background, that's where micro licensing will fit in. Or like for YouTubers and stuff, for content creators, like the very generic type of tracks that they use in the background, that's where micro licensing fits. I feel like that is the platform that's going to be affected the most by AI, especially on the entry level, which makes us move up. So maybe if you're doing micro licensing, try to go more towards like TV, or if you're doing TV, try to do more like reality TV, go towards scripted TV, or go towards movies. Just going up the ladder and becoming a better creative is all I feel like it's going to do for us as musicians. And I feel like it's good to get a lot of different opinions on this topic, because there is a lot of fear mongering with this topic, but at the same time, if you really do the due diligence to learn how to actually use this to your advantage, it's going to take you to your destination a lot quicker. In my opinion, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Exactly.
So given that though, so who is sync licensing not for then? Like, who do you think that sync licensing doesn't really fit? Like, what type of person or type of musician do you think doesn't really have, benefit from doing sync licensing?
If you're someone who's only interested and immediate money, sync licensing is not for you. You're going to get your feelings hurt pretty bad. Yeah, if you're solely money driven, you're going to have a bad time because you're going to be chasing money all the time, and money will always outrun you. That's just the fact. That's just how it is. If you have a huge ego, not for you. You got to be able to humble down, humble yourself and be able to take criticism. And I got a good story for you about this. I recently heard a story about an artist who fumbled $20K because he didn't want to take his ad libs off the instrumental. The client asked for the instrumental with no ad libs, and of course he had rapped on the beat, but they wanted everything stripped back, just the beat, and he refused to do it. He sent it to them and put his ad libs on when they said not to, and they were having this back and forth, and then he just snapped on them apparently, and that fumbled the whole bag for him and the sync agency. And as far as I remember, he's been blacklisted or blackballed.
Wow. And that's crazy.
Just don't let your ego fumble the bag that hard, because he's pretty much done with sync at that point, because everybody's gonna hear about him. So don't let your ego have you say something crazy or do something crazy. Those are the main two. Knowing when to compromise. You have to be someone who's willing to compromise, because sometimes a client might want like 3, 4, 5 revisions, and sometimes you have to be willing to do that. Like the Viacom stuff we did, I think I had like 3 or 4 revisions for some of those cues, and I didn't let it get me down too much because my intent was to serve that client. You have to be someone who's willing to do that. Now, within reason. Like if you're like on your 10th revision, you got to be like, what, I need something for my time.
Right. But 100%.
But just being someone who's basically being willing to serve a client. You're in a mutually beneficial partnership, and that's what that means. You have to be able to serve that client without too much fuss. Otherwise, they're not going to work. They don't want to work with you if you're crazy like that.
Right.
But stuff like that. If you're someone who steals beats, because I've heard about this from Producer Whisper. If you're like someone who's like a thief, stealing whole beats and submitting them for sync, this isn't for you. That's like legal issues right there. That's that's a lawsuit.
Oh yeah,
stuff like that. And if you're not willing to learn and take criticism, then sync isn't for you. You have to be very open-minded in this space. 100%. And those are the main personality types that I would say wouldn't fit for sync.
Those are some really good ones. Like I mentioned earlier, like there's a certain character trait that sync kind of forms you into. And I have a post about this coming this week, actually, about how sync for me personally changed me in a lot of different ways. It made me shift my own ego as far as how I approach music or how I approach working with people and stuff like that. And revisions is part of that. Like having those revisions is part of that. Definitely part of the process. It created better habits for me. Like I needed to work on bad habits that I have or bad routines, forced me to shift in that way to work more as a professional and aligned with someone who succeeds in sync. So it definitely changes your character traits, changes your ego, changes the way that you create music. There's a lot of different lanes that it kind of forces you into. And if you're not someone who's willing to kind of shift into that lane and step into that type of person, that identity, you're right. I don't feel like it does work for you. So that's a really good point. So what is Sagara's dream placement? What is that placement for you where you're like, I want to lock in on this, and this will be like the top of the line for me as of right now until you get to that next point where you're ready to move on to your next goal?
Oh man, top of the line placement for me would be like with some AAA game company. I've submitted a queue for one of those, but I'm not sure what's become of that. But like Nintendo or like EA or like, one of those developers, man, that would be life-changing in my opinion, to get a placement like that.
More so of like the actual soundtrack, the OST, or like let's say if it's on like an NBA 2K game and it's like the loading screen, or like when you're picking your My Character profile or something like that, the music playing in the background for that. Is that how you see is that how your dream placement is, or is more so like the track that's in the background of you, in a mission on a game or something like that?
At this point, any one of those that's how I feel right now. Like character selection, main theme, even the pause screen, just whatever. I'm just trying to get in there, essentially. Yeah. Action tracks when someone's fighting. I'm in a couple of those. Stuff like that. Or even just the promos. I'm cool with the promos. That's a very good space to be in, is the promo space, the ad space. Even if it's like 30 seconds, that's success right there. Stuff like that. I think would be my dream placements. That's high level sync, in my opinion. That's where the high level sync is. That's when you're like super up there. And I do intend to be there at some point. I know it's going to take a bit, but I'm slowly working my way up to that, those high level placements. And I'm already working with like indie developers, which it's a good space to be in because it's teaching me, I guess, the tools that I need to be knowing for like those high level placements. Because if I were to get like a big AAA client, I would know exactly what I need to do, essentially.
Right.
As far as like composition, like you have to make sure that your tracks are perfectly loopable and making sure they don't pop when that loop point happens. Just stuff like that, technical things like that I've been having to learn. But yeah, that space for me would be like, that's the dream right there.
Let's make it happen, man. Let's make it happen. Man. That's definitely that's the mindset I'm in with this new library that I'm building out. Is like, I've done the reality TV thing and it's cool. And it's I feel like it's sustainable for a while, but it's a lot of quantity. And I really want to shift towards those quality placements. And that's the cool thing about sync is like, there's a lot of different avenues, like I said earlier, that you can kind of loop and get into. And then there's a lot of fulfillment that comes with that too, as well. But I think that that's an achievable like goal for you to get. It's just about learning the things that it takes to get it along the way. Just like you had to learn the things it took to get into your first library and stuff like that. So, that would be really cool to see it come into fruition. And I 100% know with your mindset, the way you approach things, the way you carry yourself, the way you have the constant need to improve with your music. And as a musician is definitely going to be achievable. So I appreciate you coming on here, man. Like I really respect and love to just witness the journey that you've gone through. I appreciate all your help in our Discord community. I love seeing you in other Discord communities or other sync communities in general. I mean, and just seeing you provide that feedback and like helping the next person along the way. That's what it's about. And that's what I respect the most about the sync community is like that constant need to help and just like feeling fulfillment of helping the next person get, because there's a big lane out here and we can all eat. So, I'm really honored to be able to just witness it. And I can't wait to see where this goes. And I constantly want to keep you by my side and like grow with you along this lane because you're something special, man. So thank you for taking the time to come onto this interview. I appreciate it, man. Where can people find you? If you want them to find you, if you don't want them to find you, you don't have to plug yourself. But if you want people to find you, where can they find you? And then if you have any like preset packs or anything that you want to plug as far as like what you've been working on, as far as things that people can use as far as tools, like you have for that Serum dramedy pack that you have, please feel free to share right now.
All right. Appreciate that, man. Y'all can find me on, I'm mostly on Instagram these days, not much else, but Instagram, that's at Sagara Prods. So SAGARAPRODS. That's where I am most of the time. You can find me on Discord. As for my presets, I have a pack of presets. It's called Go Foolish, that I sound designed from scratch, and that's specifically for dramedy. You can find that on my website, sagaraproductions.com. It's a proven pack. I've gotten placements with that so far, which is super, super dope to me. Is that that has gotten some placements. So we know it works. Sound selection's on point, and if y'all want to cop that, it's super cheap. So if y'all want to get that, then that's cool.
I'll put it in the description too as well. That way you guys can easily find where to find that pack and where to find Sagara's social. Thank you again, man, for joining us. And you guys are going to be seeing still a lot of Sagara because this guy's going to be, I feel like, a very